chapter 23, picking up where we left off in chapter 22, where Paul is standing before the Sanhedrin. Paul looked straight at the Sanhedrin and said, "My brothers, I have fulfilled my duty to God in all good conscience to this day." At this, the high priest Ananias ordered those standing near Paul to strike him on the mouth. Then Paul said to him, "God will strike you, you whitewashed wall. You sit there to judge me according to the law, yet you yourself violate the law by commanding that I be struck." Those who were standing near Paul said, "How dare you insult God's high priest?" Paul replied, "Brothers, I did not realize that he was the high priest, for it is written, 'Do not speak evil about the ruler of your people.'" Then Paul, knowing that some of them were Sadducees and the others Pharisees, called out in the Sanhedrin, "My brothers, I am a Pharisee, descended from Pharisees. I stand on trial because of the hope of the resurrection of the dead." When he said this, a dispute broke out between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the assembly was divided. The Sadducees say that there is no resurrection, and that there are neither angels nor spirits, but the Pharisees believe all these things. There was a great uproar, and some of the teachers of the law who were Pharisees stood up and argued vigorously. "We find nothing wrong with this man," they said. "What if a spirit or an angel has spoken to him?" The dispute became so violent that the commander was afraid Paul would be torn to pieces by them. He ordered the troops to go down and take him away from them by force and bring him into the barracks. The following night the Lord stood near Paul and said, "Take courage, as you have testified about me in Jerusalem, so you must also testify in Rome." The plot to kill Paul. The next morning some Jews formed a conspiracy and bound themselves with an oath not to eat or drink until they had killed Paul. More than 40 men were involved in this plot. They went to the chief priests and the elders and said, "We have taken a solemn oath not to eat anything until we have killed Paul. Now then, you and the Sanhedrin petitioned the commander to bring him before you on the pretext of wanting more accurate information about his case. We are ready to kill him before he gets here." But when the son of Paul's sister heard of this plot, he went into the barracks and told Paul. Then Paul called one of the centurions and said, "Take this young man to the commander. He has something to tell him." So he took him to the commander. The centurion said, "Paul, the prisoner sent for me and asked me to bring this young man to you because he has something to tell you." The commander took the young man by the hand, drew him aside, and asked, "What is it you want to tell me?" He said, "Some Jews have agreed to ask you to bring Paul before the Sanhedrin tomorrow on the pretext of wanting more accurate information about him. Don't give in to them, because more than 40 of them are waiting in ambush for him. They have taken an oath not to eat or drink until they have killed him. They are ready now, waiting for your consent to their request." The commander dismissed the young man with this warning, "Don't tell anyone that you have reported this to me." Paul transferred to Caesarea. Then he called 2 of his centurions and ordered them, "Get ready a detachment of 200 soldiers, 70 horsemen and 200 spearmen to go to Caesarea at 9 tonight. Provide horses for Paul so that he may be taken safely to Governor Felix." He wrote a letter as follows: "Claudius Lysias, to His Excellency, Governor Felix, greetings. This man was seized by the Jews, and they were about to kill him, but I came with my troops and rescued him, for I had learned that he is a Roman citizen. I wanted to know why they were accusing him, so I brought him to their Sanhedrin. I found that the accusation had to do with questions about their law, but there was no charge against him that deserved death or imprisonment. When I was informed of a plot to be carried out against the man, I sent him to you at once. I also ordered his accusers to present to you their case against him." So the soldiers, carrying out their orders, took Paul with them during the night and brought him as far as Antipatris. The next day they let the cavalry go on with them, while they returned to the barracks. When the cavalry arrived in Caesarea, they delivered the letter to the governor and handed Paul over to him. The governor read the letter and asked what province he was from. Learning that he was from Cilicia, he said, "I will hear your case when your accusers get here." Then he ordered that Paul be kept under guard in Herod's palace. Chapter 23, verses 1 through 5. So Paul began speaking, testifying that he had lived before God in all good conscience, yet the high priest had him slapped to shut him up. In response to this unjust treatment, Paul called the high priest a whitewashed wall. That is a thing made to look clean on the outside, though it is actually dirty on the inside, and condemned his unlawful actions. When challenged for daring to revile the high priest, Paul said he did not know Ananias was the high priest. Some interpreters think Paul truly didn't know to whom he was speaking. Others think Paul's eyesight was bad, but more likely, Paul considered him an illegitimate high priest because of his unjust actions in conducting the trial. See Leviticus 19:15. Do not pervert justice. Do not show partiality to the poor or favoritism to the great, but judge your neighbor fairly. In other words, he took his stance. He may be your high priest, but he's not my high priest. In any case, by quoting Exodus 22:28, Paul was acknowledging respect for the leader's office, but saying this is a fake leader. Verse 6 through 9. It was clear to Paul that he wasn't going to get a fair hearing. So when he realized that some of those gathered were Sadducees, a group that denied the resurrection of the dead, and some were Pharisees, a group that believed in the resurrection of the dead, he told them he was a Pharisee on trial because of the hope of the resurrection. That was another shrewd move because technically he was right. His message was the proclamation that Jesus was the Messiah who had risen from the dead, but he used that truth to highlight the theological conflict that existed between the two groups. Winning sympathy for himself from the Pharisees, eventually they declared, "We find nothing evil in this man." Mission accomplished. The Jewish Sanhedrin wouldn't be condemning Paul that day. Verse 10 through 11. As fists started flying, the commander had his troops whisk Paul away to the barracks again. The following night, the Lord appeared to Paul to encourage him. Just as Paul had testified about Jesus in Jerusalem, it was the Lord's will that he testify in Rome. It wouldn't be a smooth ride, but God would ultimately take Paul to the heart of the Roman Empire. Sometimes in his providence, God will take you on a long and difficult road to get you where he wants you. Trust God, maintain your kingdom perspective, and as the Lord told Paul, have courage. Verse 12 through 22. The Jews who hated Paul weren't going to give up that easily. 40 of them had vowed not to eat or drink until they had killed him. So they told the religious leaders to ask the Roman commander to have Paul appear before him again so he could be questioned. But as he was being delivered, they would lie in wait to kill him. Somehow, however, Paul's nephew heard about the ambush and reported it to Uncle Paul. So Paul had a centurion take his nephew to the commander and inform him of the secret plot. God's providence had intervened again. The Lord knows how to have a nephew at the right place at the right time to foil the plans of a band of killers. Verse 23 through 30. The commander took word of this plot very seriously. He was under obligation to look after this Roman citizen in his charge. Nothing was going to happen to Paul on his watch, so he gathered 200 soldiers with 70 cavalry and 200 spearmen. 470 armed Romans against 40 fasting Jews sound like pretty good odds. To transport Paul by night to Felix the governor in Caesarea. Not only was Paul being delivered safely from the hands of those who wanted to kill him, he was getting a massive armed escort. The commander also sent a letter to the governor, explaining the circumstances and making it clear that he had been doing his job well. Verse 31 through 35. Paul was taken to Caesarea on the Mediterranean coast to see Marcus Antonius Felix, the Roman governor, or procurator, of Judea from AD 52 to 58. According to historical sources, Felix was a lousy and brutal ruler. He learned that Paul was from Cilicia, a Roman province on the coast of modern-day Turkey. That's where Paul's home city of Tarsus was located. See chapter 9, verse 11. The Lord told him, "Go to the house of Judas on Straight Street and ask for a man from Tarsus named Saul, for he is praying." Chapter 21, verse 39. Paul answered, "I am a Jew from Tarsus in Cilicia, a citizen of no ordinary city. Please let me speak to the people." In chapter 22, verse 3. "I am a Jew born in Tarsus of Cilicia, but brought up in this city. I studied under Gamaliel and was thoroughly trained in the law of our ancestors. I was just as zealous for God as any of you are today." Then Felix agreed to give Paul a hearing when his accusers arrived from Jerusalem, though Paul was kept under guard. Luke makes it clear throughout the narrative that Paul is ultimately in God's hands, not in the hands of Rome. And that is the end of chapter 23. I hope everybody learned something. Next chapter in 24 will be Paul's trial before Felix, so stay tuned for that. May God bless everyone, and I will see y'all next time.